Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and we got another episode for you of Freight Freinds with Grace Sharkey. We just caught up for about, 35 minutes before we hit the record time. So I think that's a new record for us in order to get started.
Yeah, you should have recorded it and then it could have been like pay people to listen to that because there's some pretty spicy stuff from both of our lives that I think people would actually have enjoyed all of that content. So,
Yeah, we're talking about the stealing and traveling to, and obviously none of these are related. Freight drama. Also, what else did we hit on is traveling to Japan.
yes.
So that's three major, I guess, points of the 30-minute conversation while we
Yeah,
just
just teaching you short Japanese phrases for about 10 minutes.
But we got a really good show for y'all today because we're gonna dive into a few different big topics and then keeping the trend with the last episode where we talk about our favorite logistics of stories, so where products are sourced, how they arrive at your doorstep. So we got a couple of those for you, and then our favorite conspiracy theories. Mine is a little bit more lighthearted this time. Last time I talked about is Britney Spears actually dead or being held somewhere against her will? So that one was a little bit dark. I felt like I needed to go a little bit lighter on this one. So we got those a little bit later in the show. But first, the main topic for this week's show is we want to talk about how to spot scams online and how you can do it too. Now, both of us have been working in media in some capacity for the better part, I think, I know I've been working in media and working online since 2007, but you've been working in it for, I think, a handful of years now, too. So you obviously cover the industry in more of a professional manner, journalistic integrity, all of that good stuff. So we're going to learn from the journalistic side of things and then also from just a casual, just sort of internet perouser, I guess. I don't even know if that's a word. Internet peruser.
Yeah. Yeah,
Peruser. Yeah.
yeah, it is today. Yeah.
So I scour the internet and, my history working in sports broadcasting and transferring that over to logistics. There are definitely some tips that we use to spot potential scams online, try to communicate those to friends and family. And, with all the things that are going on with content or have been going on with content moderation and fake news, misinformation, all of that, it's only going to get more challenging to spot these scams online with the I guess mass adoption of AI, marketing technology, things like that, where deep fakes are very easy to make at a very affordable rate. So that's the reason why I wanted to bring up this main topic. Because, since we're media people, it's our job to scour the internet, find those good stories, research those good stories. But what are some scams that you see regularly that people fall for?
Well, I would say, there's a lot of it, especially like on Twitter. It's For me, I think a lot of times you'll see like ads and things of that nature that are really kind of off-putting. When it comes to like media, though, it's really funny. Like I think the biggest issue that I have, and these are also sites that are usually not as popular. I think that's a big part, right? Is like make sure you know what the sites you're looking at and kind of go to its about page, founding page, look it up on Wikipedia, see how long it's been around, who's contributing to it, etc. But their clickbait is like such a huge issue, I think, especially I started to catch on to it over the last couple elections, right? You'll find these like huge, like awe dropping, like um, headlines, right? One example I remember forever ago was like um, Michelle Obama like screams at her children or something like that. And I remember like clicking on the article and I'm reading it, and it's like just a positive article about Trump's like wife. I can't remember her name now, but it was like
Oh,
that
Melania.
kind. Yeah, Melania, and it's that type. And I remember getting done with it, and I was like, wait, they didn't even say Michelle Obama's name in this. So it's like for me, I would tell people to really know the good news and media sites. There's different. If you search right now on Google, like the honest websites, you'll see kind of the ones that frame maybe more towards the right, as people say, or the left. I always say try to do the moderate. I mean, there's even just everyone out there, I'm not even taking a side because I've been on very left media sites where it's like, okay, that's an opinion. Same with the other side. So I would say like most of the most medium sites, it's like MSNBC is pretty good at being non-biased. Um, I would also say CNN can be, depends on like what exactly they're talking about. If it's more of like an opinion type of article or just an overall panel discussion, sometimes they skew a little bit more left. But if you're looking at like dropping breaking news, I'd say CNN is like my go-to.
Mhm.
CNBC is another huge one too.
CNBC, I love.
CNBC I think is my favorite because money has no bias, you know? So it's like that's where you're going to find the true news most of the time. Now, again, there's opinions, so you have to don't take everything that happens on CNBC and go buy stock right away, right? But
Especially after this week's news.
yeah,
They're firing
exactly.
their executive director or president, Chris Licht. I think
Yes,
that
I
was
think
his
that's
title.
was that CNN, I think,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
CNN. And
Mhm.
he's only been on the job for a year, and he basically got fired for telling the truth about,
Yeah.
how that platform has evolved.
Right? And I think just in general is to really ask yourself like how wild is this news?
Hmm.
And then go to other sources and see if they're reporting it too. It's especially you'll see I think on like Twitter, right? You'll see like so and so died and I can't tell you how many times that's caught me before where I'm
Oh,
like,
Betty White.
"No." Yeah,
All the time.
yeah. Yeah, the poor lady. And so always check for another source. I think
Hmm.
that's the biggest thing. It's like make sure you're getting all sides of the story. Make sure you're not just taking rumors for facts. And almost in any regard, right? Even if you see like your aunt or your cousin post something that's not sourced, that's a huge part of it,
Or
right?
like just a meme photo that's
Yeah.
been clearly photoshopped. It's pixelated to hell. It's like, come on, these are easy
Yes.
layups to say that, there might be something else going on here.
Look for like links as well within articles. That's something that our shout out to Meg, our wonderful editor in chief, is like always honest about. Like
Hmm.
one, I think that does help with traffic, right? And the SEO type of stuff as
Sure.
well on your end. But for me, I think it's helpful if I read an article to say, okay, cool, here's different links that I can go back and fact check this point that they're making. You'll see it in my articles too. Like if I'm ever for example, if you saw the next trucking article that we just did, that came from a rumor from, well, one's finally confirmed, but rumor from the information. But when I wanted to get opinions on it, I reached out to individuals that I knew were well versed in the industry and would give an opinion that I think showed both sides of the story,
Hmm.
right? A lot of times, I mean, especially next, right? I think there's some people that say, yeah, that business model is just never going to work. There are ways for all businesses to work out in the end. So that's why I reached out to Ryan Schreiber. I knew that he would have something a little bit more positive in that direction to say. But I also know of the rumors and the individual that shall continue to be named anonymous. Uh, I knew that his personal views too, that he was close to a lot of individuals from the company who had left the company and
Hmm.
would be able to kind of give that opinion as well. When I'm writing, I really try to avoid, and honestly, our editors will check us too in this case, my own personal opinion,
Hmm.
right? And if I do have a personal opinion that I feel is strong, I'm going to find someone else to back that up
Hmm.
too. So look for that kind of stuff. If it's just uh, content that's one-sided, one opinion, that's not really fair news to me. And it might be right, it might be wrong, but I think there's always more than one side of a story, right?
Yeah, and I think that, with your due diligence in how you source stories, I think that that's also an important reminder that, the legacy media, we've talked about this in our last episode about how legacy media is dying. And whenever your business model is dying, you have to have new ways to generate revenue. One of
Yeah.
those ways is through clickbait.
Yeah.
Clickbait works surprisingly well. Not surprisingly. I mean, that's why people do it, is because it's enticing to get you to click on the article, even if it talks about, the headline is about Michelle Obama, and then you go actually read the article and it has nothing to do with
Yes.
Michelle Obama. So that to me is an egregious moment of clickbait. But there are ways to do clickbait where it's not that egregious, where you can still get the people to, inspire curiosity so that they do click on the article and get value from it. I think a good rule of thumb is to find journalists, find creators that you trust, that will do their due diligence and that will check the sources for you. And if they do mess up, like, that's to be expected, but they should be owning up to those
Yeah.
mistakes and being open and honest with you.
Hmm.
Sagar and Jenny, who is a host of the news program Breaking Points, he will do this, and I've seen him do it, where he will say that one story in particular, and they're independently funded, so they're not funded by sponsors and advertisers, which is what legacy media
Yeah.
is typically funded by.
Yep.
So they have a responsibility to their audience, which I love that business model. But he was, I think it was right before Russia invaded Ukraine, and he was basically saying that this is warmongering talk, that we're just being subject or subject to this news, to where we got to have to give more funding to the Department of Defense. So and then it was like the very next day that Russia
Yeah.
invaded Ukraine. So he got on air and he did like a full apology. I'm sorry, I read this wrong, and this is why I read it this way. And he owned up to it and moved on. And
Yeah.
that made me trust him even more. That even if he's going to get something wrong, he's going to own up to it, and he's going to use that as an opportunity to further educate you. Now, when you were talking about different biases that these legacy news programs have, which everybody has biases, but some of
Yes.
it is
Yes.
a specific marketing ploy. Like, I don't have to explain the differences in the audience structure of like a Fox News versus CNN, because everybody knows what market that they're trying to target. But ABC, NBC, MSNBC, some of these other platforms, you might not be able to tell the biases. So there is one site that's trying to combat this, and it's called Ground News. They have a really great
Mm.
app. I do think that you have to pay for it, to a certain extent. But if you read their news, so they'll give you the top stories, and then they'll show you which way that publication tends to lean. So then that way you have the opportunity to see both sides of the issue. So I love that
Yeah.
approach. And then just a general, because I know that the majority of people are not going to, double check and read sources. They're going to see a headline that it convinces them of something that they already kind of thought, a preconceived bias that they already have, and they'll see a headline, it just reinforces it, and they won't do any further legwork to it. But just a general rule of thumb, I think, for most people is, if a news story makes you emotional immediately, that's by design.
Yeah.
And you need to recognize that design. And if you do want to, take it a little bit of a step further, what I learned during sports broadcasting is that we would typically hear, a quote from an athlete, and sometimes it would just be astounding that this person would say this. But then I started practicing going it, because Dan Patrick taught me this, my favorite sports broadcaster.
Yeah.
He taught me how, a lot of like modern day not me personally, but he talked about it on his podcast. But he talked about how a lot of modern day reporters will just take that headline and run with it. Where he found an edge and where he found an advantage is he would go and he would find out what was the question that was asked before that answer. What was the question that was asked after
Yes.
that answer? So that was key in figuring out where that person was coming from, the context, the nuance of that answer. And I can't tell you how many times, like, my other co-hosts on the radio show did not do that. And
Hmm.
I actually had an advantage broadcasting wise because I did that. So if you are a fan of any kind of sports, politicians, anything like that, be in the habit of recognizing news that makes you emotional, recognize that feeling, and then just wait. Wait for the
Yeah.
story to kind of, work itself out. The breaking news is probably, I don't want to say like the biggest cancer on like our media environment, but it really is, because people are addicted to being first. They're not addicted to being right. And that's
Yeah.
where I think a lot of our issues come from. Like just last week, there was a story about, an AI powered drone that was gonna, go attack this place. And, the general gave it specific orders, and the AI drone instead, like, wanted to do something else. So it came and killed the operator, the drone operator, and then went and carried on that article circled. I debated that article. My friends and family sent it to me. It came up in conversation. That story was debunked a day later. A day later. So it just how quick that news, fake news, it travels.
Yeah.
What does they say? Like a lie will travel around the world before the truth has the answer. Can be heard. Something like that. I just butchered that quote, but
Well, and
that's where I kind of stand.
it sounds like a lot of it too, I think, stems from the creation of like 24-hour news
Mhm.
cycles, because it's interesting to go remember the good old Russia balloons, right? Uh Imagine having to discuss that on air with no resources of to like what's going on with that
For the
for
Chinese balloons, is that what
hours.
you mean?
Yeah, the
Okay, okay.
Chinese balloons. Look at me starting a rumor. The China, and so it's like, uh, to be able to talk about that for even more than like 15 minutes, you're probably making something up at some point, or you're making an assumption that you have no idea. Where it was interesting because I remember watching an interview with a CIA guy after it was all finished, and they're like, "Why did you wait so long?" Because I remember everyone the whole time was like, oh, they don't want it to like fall on people, and people are like, how much could this really hurt someone? Just like drop it. And he made like a really interesting point that was like, oh, well, we wanted to see what it was watching. Like we actually can learn more as a CIA
Huh.
watching what it's doing. Like what does it want, right? Than like just stopping it. Cause like, yes, we could have just stopped it, but there's nothing that it's not like this balloon can like get into everyone's bank accounts and like take the money from America, but they were interested in what exactly it was doing, so they
Hmm.
wanted to observe it, and then of course then wait till it was safe and then
See,
take it
that's such a
down.
reasonable explanation
And
instead
isn't
of
that a
just
more interesting story
right.
too? And that's what sometimes like even it's interesting because sometimes freightways we might not get the initial story because it goes to like some of these guys will go to Wall Street first, or even like the Information Next trucking story, right? I could have put out an article 2 seconds after the Information article came out,
Hmm.
right? And it would have been short. It would have been pretty much the same thing. But I that's where I feel like it's more fun as a journalist to sit back and say, okay, let's like dive into this though and really address what this problem is that we're seeing in this story, right? We're seeing that the investment in this space was just insane, right? People
Hmm.
were getting insane evaluations or valuations and investment dollars that we're now learning, hopefully people in the story that read the story now, that was just way too much, and there's no way
Hmm.
it's going to sell for that much. And that's the real point of it. It's not fun for me. Maybe it's fun breaking the news in that sense, but I had more fun being able to help people understand why that story was so interesting for the Information, right? Now the Information where it's at in like a level of journalism, you want to say, in terms of like audience level, that's not their main goal. So it's just like, I actually did hear from the girl who wrote the original article, and she was very nice and said that she really liked our analysis of it and points of view and everything like that. So it's, you have to understand that like some level, the like Wall Street, if Wall Street Journal got an article like that, they're only going to give it so much coverage and so much work. Uh, that it's, I feel like it's our job as Freightways to really dive into maybe some of the bigger stories that you're seeing, and really give our expertise even more. So that's, sometimes I actually like reading smaller publications because you get to learn that little bit more. Retail Dive is another great one, right? If you're ever seen, well, our Supply Chain Dive is another one. But same thing, like if you ever read something about patents, we'll go to patentlaw.com, I think it is, because they'll probably have more information on it.
Hmm.
And so when you say like how do you kind of go cipher through that news, like take the news from the top one but follow the story, and see who's even diving deeper into it, because you might learn a little bit more.
And I think that's how news is really trending for a
Yeah.
lot of folks, is that you want to have that nuanced opinion. I think a lot of folks do realize that the breaking news cycle, because for we're not built like, as a human species, we are not built to have all of this information inputted into our eyeballs, into our brains every single day, all day, everywhere we look. Human biology will tell you that, hunter gatherer days, that we had to pay attention to the foods that were poisonous, the
Yeah.
animals that were dangerous, and it was programmed in our mind to remember the bad things in order for survival. But
Yeah.
now, if you post a picture to Instagram, you might get 30. I mean, back maybe the glory days when organic reach was still there, but you might get 30 comments that are all, just "you're beautiful" or whatever, "great job," but you get that one comment that is negative, and that's why you remember it. And
Yeah.
so with our habits of nowadays, of just trying to, digest all of this news, you can't. So don't
Yeah.
try to. It's fun, I think, in some moments, to kind of be there, like maybe on Twitter or some other social media platform, to see the breaking news and see how, a story evolves. But I tend to, when stories like that happen, I try to train myself not to get too emotional, but then have those people like you, like Breaking Points, like a Matt Taibbi, or even like Glenn Greenwald's, some of these other independent journalists who know that diving deep into these stories takes time, and it
Yeah.
takes resources, and certain people are going to do a better job of that, and have they're going to have principles over party. And that's typically where I try to look, and I try to get news, in-depth news, from people who think that way as well, that they're not sort of COVID kind of changed a lot for me, and how I digest the news, and the people that I go to as
Yeah.
trusted sources, and the people that I don't go to anymore. And it's just, I feel like, a lot of legacy media is all corrupt, and it's all, sort of
Yes.
funded by intelligence agencies and governments and big corporations. Meanwhile, going to the people who are on the ground, independent listener funded models, people who, practice going in depth like yourself. I think that that's the future of news. And I think it's more, supporting at the independent level, versus, some of these larger legacy news channels, which are, I think they're in real trouble.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. It reminds me of a couple of individuals. Well, one. So I was gonna say Clarissa Haas, right? She's our main investigative reporter, and she's, I think, one of our most underestimated reporters at Freightwaves,
Yeah,
and
she's great.
she underestimates herself too. I will say that. But whenever you see one of her stories, like, please, because sometimes I think people will say, listen, I know some people want to say sometimes that we put out like clickbait headlines. No, we don't. We put out great headlines that have you read the whole story, because I've seen the data. You read the whole thing when it's a
Mm.
clickbait headline. But sometimes I think people say like, we're there. A lot of times we cover like those layout stories, those a lot of the stuff that she does report on. I will tell you right now that does the most due diligence I've ever seen from a reporter on any type of story like that. She will work her butt off to find out what's really happening. And a lot of times with her stories, that's why you so often see multiple parts to them. Know that there's probably even more juice in that orange that she did not publish,
Hmm.
because she did not feel like she had enough people to verify that juice in order to put that out there. And that's why you'll see sometimes that this is a part of a series. This is something I'm working on. She's been working on like a murder with the FBI for like decades.
Wow.
Like, and that's so there's, I just want people to understand as well that sometimes there might be, maybe a story comes out and you hear rumors about something else happening. Well, it's probably because that writer of the article, the journalist, didn't have enough sources that they felt comfortable making that point. And that's the type of stuff I really love. I think there's sometimes a lot gossip column stuff like that that will put out news that ends up being true, But I respect those that like kind of go out of their way to of course make sure everything is valid. And that's really, I feel like she's really influenced me to do the same thing. If I hear a rumor, that's great. But if I can't find anyone to, even as an anonymous source, come and say that that's accurate, like, then we're just spreading gossip, and it's not that's not journalism to me. But so just realize the sources do matter, and the due diligence is definitely done. And on your point too of like bias, non-biased media, I've totally opened my eyes to a lot of that too. That's why I love so many different podcasts. I think we've talked about this before, the Red Scare
Hmm.
podcast. Have you ever heard of that one before?
I have, but I don't know that I've listened to any episodes.
Yeah, it is supposed to be like more funny and humorous, but it's a number of it's a couple of girls who are journalists, and just sometimes what they touch on is stories that wouldn't get approved because of what you're talking about,
Hmm.
because the funders of certain sources are saying no, 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 this can't go out. And so there's uh I always feel like I bring this up every time I'm on the show, but Tim Dillon, if you go back through some of his, no, he does a really good job of
He
like
does.
bringing on these journalists who like, there was one girl he had on who's like, she can't even come back to America because she's basically been blacklisted from like working for most large news journalists, but um she's basically like has been showcasing issues with a lot of large political families and parties, and nothing that she's researching is false. She's got sources for everything that she
Hmm.
writes about, but it's like, it's sad that I think she was like living in like Guatemala, like off the grid, because of like the danger of like some of the stuff that she's been able to find and source. So
Well, I mean, even Clarissa, like, she has to take certain
yeah,
protections to get
yeah.
protected from trucking companies.
Yes, yeah, no, yeah, and we make fun of her all the time too, because she's like, like all the time going after like the double broker guys of like LA, and they're like, they know her, like that's
Like, she has like, and I guess maybe I probably shouldn't, but she has security measures both in
yeah, she
person and
uses VP,
virtual.
hella VPNs are being used from her. That's 100%, and I just realized too, with that type of reporting, we're talking about just even Freightways reporting, like threats that she's gotten from different groups that I don't even want to give credit to out there, is insane. So just realize that, yeah, I have so much respect for those journalists, and ever since doing this job, whenever I watch like a documentary or something like that, with like where journalists is like the main, talking about like the main sourcing of it and everything, I just imagine, I know how much work they've been
Mhm.
doing and how much they dedicated their lives to that story, and I think that stuff's just so cool.
Yeah. So to I guess piggyback on that, if you have journalists that you support and and you think they do good work and they have Patreon and they have
Yes.
some kind of a way to fund them, a Substack, do it, because
Yeah.
it is important. It is takes a lot of time and resources, and that's why these bigger news companies will not fund that style of news, because it does take a lot of time. It's not as quick as the clickbaity breaking news where these it's a managed decline is what these Fox News and CNN, they know that their time is kind of dwindling a little bit.
Hmm.
So support the people who need it and the people who are doing that great work. I think I do it at the local level, and then I do it at the national level. So like a Breaking Points, Matt Taibbi are a couple of them. But then here in Jacksonville, we have a couple independent news organizations that are getting started as well, because local news, if you think it's local, it's not local. A lot of these
No, it's all next
channels,
star.
yes,
Yeah.
they've been bought up by like these bigger corporations, and they have certain talking points that they want to make
Yep.
sure that Sinclair, I think Broadcasting is one that's bought up the majority of
Hmm.
the local TV stations, and they all have. I know people locally here in Jacksonville who worked on different local media shows, and they were laid off because Sinclair Broadcasting can just make that same show and they can
Hmm.
just insert word here, insert city here, and they
Yep.
can just syndicate it to all of their different partner programs. So even local news has been impacted.
Yep.
And it's not just from like the news angle as well. Like you see a lot of, scamming going on social media, whether it's like, some of the crypto scams that we saw, of course, also a lot of like skincare, like I know J Lo got a bunch of heat for her skincare line that she came out with, and she talks about how this skincare line has helped a 50-year-old essentially look like she's in her 20s, and it's like, ma'am,
No.
that's not just skincare. It's
Yeah.
not just lotion you're putting on your face.
Thousands of
That
dollars in nutritionists and
the
workout
best
routines.
doctors,
Yes.
the best
Yeah.
Botox, like
Yes.
that's what, and allegedly, I probably should throw that in there. But her skincare is not the only thing. So just do your due diligence in every ask, because everybody's trying to sell you. So find the
Yes.
people you trust, find the brands you trust, and then hopefully they keep your trust for a lot longer,
But
because
trust us. Trust
All
the
right,
people who are
let's move
telling you
on
these
to
things.
our next topic. That's Apple's VR headset. So I'm going to try to play this video, and it's going to be challenging, so bear with me here. But it comes from one of my favorite creators, and that's Cleo Abram. She's someone that I really look up to as far as the kind of content she covers and the way that she covers it. This is one of those creators that I trust. So hopefully this will play for everyone. So I'm going to share this screen, and hopefully y'all can hear it. Oh, you can't. Hold on. Let me turn the volume on. There we go.
Yeah.
So, initial thoughts on Apple's new VR AR headset.
Uh, $3,500. I saw like a tweet that was like they've made like a buy now pay later where they're paying like $22 every 2 weeks for like the next so many years just to get one. Uh, I think it's cool. Have you ever done VR or played VR games or anything like that?
So I've only done it in like a theme park environment. I haven't used the Oculus. So I know that
Okay.
that one is the one that's made by Facebook. The one that I have some friends who have access to those headsets, and it's one that I love. AR, augmented reality, where
Yeah.
it's almost like Pokemon Go, or
Yes.
some of the Snapchat, filters and things like that, even, TikTok filters. So I like AR much more than I like VR. And I haven't tried Oculus because I just don't want to give Zuckerberg access to my eyeballs. But Apple, they are open for you.
I already have a theory. This isn't even my conspiracy theory of the month, but I already have a theory that they're watching our eyeballs anyways and what we look at on our screen and all that anyways. But no, I will say it's gaming wise really freaking cool. I've played like and I actually I haven't played on an Oculus. I've played on like an even more powerful one where you have to like set up the whole room for it and stuff. And it was insane and like just it's so crazy to like look down at your hands, and look like in the game I was fighting zombies and I was holding like a flashlight and a gun and it like even though I wasn't holding them, the way that your brain works with what it sees
Mm.
and everything, it felt like it was just like it's really strange phenomenon to kind of explain. And it just was so real. And like, when you play a video game, sometimes you forget about what's happening behind you. So I remember like like I'm like standing there, I'm like, oh, there's no zombies, blah blah, and I turn around and I literally like scream bloody murder because there's one like just like breathing on my neck, like
Yeah, no. I
from
would
behind. Yeah,
cry and run
yeah,
away.
like I literally was like screaming. They played another dinosaur one too that was insane, but it's I do question like how this will become popular because I just feel like as much as we are already so engraved in our phones into social media, I do feel like there's this like level of people wanting to push against that even in our generation, like going outdoors and like almost like doing these like complete off the grid type of trips that I just wonder like how engraved into our everyday lives this could become. Um and also cuz like a lot of times I've seen in these like VR programs like for the business level, they'll say like, "Hey, we can have a meeting, and we can all see what each other looks like." And it's like, well, that's not what we look like though, and that's not how. I would hate to like make friends with someone virtually and then like end up meeting them in real life and they're nothing like
Hmm.
what they see. Like imagine if I like made like a VR and like I was just like a 7 foot tall gorgeous model. Like, like it would and then you like meet me, it's like, who is this 5'3" troll? Like it doesn't it doesn't like that's where I wonder like how will it be regulated to a point where it's like you have to be honest about who you are?
Hmm.
Um, and it kind of reminds me of like, I don't, did you ever get into like chat rooms like when you're in high school or anything? When yeah, same. Like you would pretend to be someone else, but you like did that knowing that you would like purposely were hopefully never see these individuals in your life.
Right.
Like you weren't doing that to like people that you want to like be with. So part of me is just like what is this what in my life do I need a virtual reality of that
Well,
the actual reality isn't working?
so there's a show, and you haven't, not Black Mirror, but it's kind of similar, I guess, but it's a self-contained show. It's not like individual episodes are self-contained, kind of like Black Mirror.
Yeah.
But it's called The Feed, and it's free on like Amazon Prime Video, and it came out in 2019, and it's essentially what I envision like social media news and memories is going to get to. And the new Apple VR set is very scarily
Similar?
similar to that. So in that show, it's almost a brain implant that is put into your mind, and so everything you see is documented and recorded. And so the theory is like the good side of it is so you have all of these memories that you can go back and you can hit play on again, or you can, share like your
Mm.
child's birthday. If you saw it with your eyes, it's recorded and stored in your own database. The thing with this show though is that I guess the plot line behind it is that someone hacks into that system and implants the wrong implants like a murder into your database that showed you committing. And so you have to kind of go through like the motions of it's a really like fascinating series. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, wow, this is pretty much where probably social media is going to go, where it's not in, or your computer is not in your hands anymore via the phone. It's really implanted into your brain. Because similar to how you kind of feel with the headset, I don't there are still rumors of like how heavy is this headset going to
Yeah.
be. The battery pack itself is not attached to the headset. So you have to kind of put
Mm.
that in your pocket, and it's only good. The charge is only good for 2 hours. So I also kind of wonder like how the
$3,500 for 2 hours?
and so well with a lot of
Oh,
Apple products, the first gen is
yeah.
not the best.
Yes.
So I think that they'll make improvements to it, but I think the ultimate road that we do go to is like the Apple technology in the size of like Google Glass, where it's like
Yes.
regular glasses that you're wearing. And then I think, within 10 years, it's going to be a Neuralink kind of device that you can just input into your brain and not have to worry about carrying a phone or, any of these other devices. Because I do think that there are opportunities. Like the first thing I thought of when I saw this headset is that you can have like the three monitors that are like the size of the room, and
Oh,
that to me just like blew me away. That I'm sold on that, because I the first thing I thought of is like, if I could be on a plane and not have to be so squished and I'm trying to type on my little laptop. I could just have
Mm.
these glasses on and have
And just
3 different
like,
screens and still be able to work like super efficiently. I also
yeah,
thought,
but
oh, go
to
ahead.
like push against that though, do you feel then that you would end up working too much? Like
Probably. I'm already a workaholic.
yeah, do you know what I mean? Like it's see, my first thing was, oh, you're right. Like if you took that to like a Beyonce concert, then you could film the whole thing and see it all day while also experiencing it. See, for me, it would that would be something really cool to take. That's a one-time experience that I could also capture and see over and over again. Where it's like, I guess, and you're almost looking at it as an application that can be used to yeah, allow you to work at all times wherever you want. That's
Well,
insane.
there were other use cases too.
No, but yeah.
What was it? So you can sit courtside at a game. Like I will probably never reach that level of being able to afford it, celebrity
Yeah.
level to sit courtside at a game. But that would be amazing to be able to, like, if the NBA were to. There's also rumors that Disney is going to be developing, something for Apple's VR headset, so you could walk through theoretically a Disney park with that headset on. There's also the application of using it at an NBA game, where if the NBA partnered with Apple, then you would be able to sit courtside instead of the traditional TV broadcast. So
Yeah.
those applications sound really cool to me. And then thinking about it from the lens of supply chain and logistics, I think driver training could probably be really
Yes.
upgraded using these headsets.
Yes.
Digital twin environment. I have a buddy
Yes.
who works in at Mercedes Benz, and they currently use the
Yep.
Microsoft HoloLens to. He's an engineer, so he's responsible for troubleshooting any kind of mechanical or electric car issues. And so for a lot of their tutorials, they film them with the HoloLens on, and so they'll go through and like fix the car. He said that the technology is a little bit wonky, and so the best use case for them now, like they started it with like a lot of hubbub, thinking that it would change, as far as like how they manufacture and diagnose cars and troubleshoot them. But he said that now there's a lot of, sort of the only possibility that you can really use this technology is just giving access to your customers and giving them like support requests. So
See,
that's how they're
that's
using their videos for
that's what
that
I'm
use
wondering, if
case.
it's like, if it's something that people will get and adopt and think maybe it's something it could be something what much more powerful than it ends up being, but still useful in a way like that, right? Like, um, even at some level, like we have a cell phone that could has the computing power to do pretty much anything, but we don't really use it for the power 100% to that level, right? Like we still use it for social media and fun and ways that probably wasn't initially thought of. So I just wonder. It's and you're right. Actually, I mean, there's actually a lot of this. I think almost more of au- uh
AR, like augmented
AR.
reality.
Yeah, right. When it comes to supply chain twins and that kind of stuff. I mean, I just if you a point of sale as one of my podcasts. I just did a whole episode on Nvidia. Right, they just hit their like $1 trillion market cap, and they're doing some really cool stuff. Their computing chips with Mercedes Benz actually allow them to create like a twin of a new manufacturing space, so they can like all together on teams put together a virtual line.
Hmm.
And let's say they want to like put a robot somewhere, well, someone can like they can move things around. It's basically like The Sims, but also like at the end of situating everything, press play and see what a car how it would come out at the end of it, right? So then they can then take once they're done with that, just actually produce the line the way that it needs to be done. So without having to actually create the line first, they create it in a reality and then they go forward and moving it. It's a really cool video with it too
Hmm.
that kind of shows you how the process. But I mean that stuff I think is really cool, and if that's like what it's going to be used for, I think it's actually really incredible, and it's going to save a lot of time and help with a lot of supply chains. Augmented reality as well. I mean, where I kind of think like this kind of stuff could be cool is like you want to go try on an outfit, right? Or go like shopping and
Yes.
try something on virtually and see how it looks. But then there's also a part of me of like, everyone's bodies are so different. Like, how
Mhm.
are we really at that point where we're capturing all these like small little discrepancies, kind of like you're saying with what he's doing at Mercedes Benz too? Like, it's mostly there, but not fully. That could still lead to issues. So yeah, it's I go back and forth because like even when I like to say, well, I take it to a Beyonce concert, like because it's funny, I really push myself at concerts now. I'll take a few videos, but I really push myself to put my phone away and just
Hmm.
like enjoy the experience as it is. And that's sometimes I wonder if something like that, if uh are we gonna as humans really be experiencing anything or just augmenting our experience
See,
or
I kind of think that almost those personal experience will be prioritized so much more,
yes.
where that kind of where like an AR headset would come into play would be more like Beyonce licensing out, someone else to record that for her, and then maybe giving that video away for free to, maybe
Yes.
a group of people who would never be able to afford to go to her
Yes.
concert, or maybe they're disabled and they wouldn't be able to go to a concert because they everybody stands the whole time or something like
Yes.
that. So I could see a use case for that, but it's almost kind of crazy to see this. Like, as you were talking, I was thinking about the story I saw earlier this week about the overwhelming amount of people that are invading our national parks, and like the long wait times to go to these parks and things like that. And I think that's a good thing, and I wonder if that's being driven by all of this just technology, social media, daily news, a barrage of news, and people just want the escape. So
Yeah.
I wonder if those are kind of playing off of each other.
Yeah. It's interesting. Uh I don't know. Like I will say this. I think the price is part of it, right?
Mm.
So it's kind of like the early adopter. It might not make sense, but maybe as more and more people get it, then it becomes a thing. And you talk to me 2 years from now, and we're not even talking on this computer. We're just virtually chatting in a room. Yeah.
Yes. All
So
the
like, mark my
attendance.
words. Yeah. No.
We'll
But
be
like
attending
that's
conferences that way.
well, that's what I mean. It's like, when some people are like, this meeting could have been in an email. I'm just fearful that we're just gonna have all these dumb virtual meetings that could have been emails,
Well,
just
at
because
least
the
with the
technology's there.
well, at least with I guess the AR headset, we'll have legs under compared
Yeah, like
to
you're gonna be sending
Zuckerberg's
emails to
metaverse.
people on your little virtual reality at like 2 o'clock in the morning on your red eye. When Blythe, no one's even up answering your emails
You
anyways.
just schedule the send. Schedule it for 8 a.m. the next day. Everybody's happy.
I just have this like pet peeve where I'm like, if I'm on an airplane, I'm just like, no, I'm in the air. Whatever's happening in the world like doesn't exist, and I'm watching Hulu for the next so many hours. I love that. Like, there's especially as there's so many like just individuals I talk to in my line of work are like, I'm gonna get on the plane, but give me like 15 minutes. I'll be connected to the Wi-Fi. It's like,
Oh, the Wi-Fi is so trash.
really? What do you think? Delta's usually pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every I Maybe it's United and American that have it's like the go not Gojo, because that's a different story. That's Succession.
Yeah,
It's
just
like
naming things. Gojo, I'm telling you, a Gojo app never works.
or it's something like whatever. The
Yes.
airplane Wi-Fi that's trash is the one that you pay $10 for. Definitely on United, and it might be other companies too. Maybe